We start this hour in North America as the G7 summit progresses in the Canadian Rockies. World leaders are treading a delicate diplomatic balance, with Middle East tensions, trade frictions and global security dominating talks. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said that he'll hold a one-to-one meeting with President Trump on Monday about finalising the UK-US trade deal agreed by the two leaders last month. He has also stated that there is a strong consensus among G7 leaders on the need for de-escalation in the Israel-Iran conflict. A draft joint statement has been made by the G7 leaders calling for de-escalation and affirming Israel's right to defend itself. However, US President Donald Trump has not yet signed off on the draft, this according to reports. Trump is set to start his day with a meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney in Alberta. The encounter comes amid continuing trade tensions, despite a warmer meeting in Washington last month. The two are set to discuss bilateral trade and defence cooperation before Trump heads into closed-door G7 sessions. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to join the summit after a stop in Vienna. He says he will discuss a defence package purchase with President Trump, but stressed that US military aid is not on the table. Well, lots set to be discussed with the ongoing global tensions and trade tensions. Among the topics set to be discussed, joining me on the telecast is Megha Sharma, our senior executive editor of NewsX World. She's reporting live from Alberta. Megha, what can you tell us about what we've heard so far and what we can expect in the coming hours and days?
Yes, before I go and take you through the schedule on day one, where the leaders of the G7 have already arrived. They arrived yesterday through the day, but there's fresh information pouring in, and this is going to be raising eyebrows because as per a news report, US President Donald Trump has said that he does not intend to sign the G7 statement on the Iran-Israel conflict. He has said that he will not speak about Iran and Israel, but he's ready to talk about trade and quote-unquote many other things. He's also further said that throwing Russia out of the G7 was a huge mistake. And again, speaking about how the primary focus of the US-Canada bilateral is going to be about trade between both countries. And the US president has also said that the Iranians want to talk about de-escalation. So these are strong statements coming in from US President Donald Trump. Trump has been talking about how there needs to be de-escalation and dialogue between Iran and Israel. Yesterday also statements came out where he said that there is a need for a deal to be struck between both the countries, and there needs to be stoppage of firing of projectiles and ballistic missiles against one another in their territories. There have been over 245 people, civilians, military leaders, as well as scientists that have been killed in the Israeli strikes up until today in the last 72. Josh, strong statements. The fact that Trump does not want to talk about Iran and Israel, and we have been talking about how the Israel-Iran conflict is going to overshadow the G7 leaders summit, says quite something about the US stance on this entire matter. In fact, yesterday, US President had also spoken about he is not averse to the possibility of Russia intervening in the matter. So we continue to see that Donald Trump is leaning towards Russia in more ways than one on a number of issues, whether we talk about the pressure that is being put by the other G6 nations and as well as the Ukrainian president that there should be more sanctions imposed on Russia. There need to be freezing of assets of Russia. There need to be price caps that need to be put on the energy resources, especially the Russian oil. All these demands, all these requests, the pressure that is mounting on US President does not seem to impact him because he stands true to his statement, particularly in the hopes that by aligning with Russia on certain aspects is going to bear results that is going to help in the mediation talks and thereby bring about a peace deal between both the countries. Remember, that has been the political plank of US President Donald Trump while he was campaigning, that he is going to bring peace between US and between Ukraine and Russia. He said, I'm going to be negotiating a peace deal between both the countries in the next 24 hours. Those were the statements in the initial weeks of his presidency. That has not happened despite major efforts by the US administration to broker peace between both countries. And it's also interesting, Josh, that between I think 1991 and 1994 there was the Russian government was part of the G7 summit, whose name had been changed from G7 to G8. It was later on removed from the leaders summit. It was later on removed from the group of 7, which was the group of 8, and then it in turn became group of 7 once again. So Trump goes on to say he is in full support of Russia to be part of the G7, turning it again as G8. So those are latest developments, and it will be interesting to see how things pan out, because the G7 nations are at this point of time and again pointing that there needs to be de-escalation, there needs to be dialogue in the Israel-Iran conflict that is taking place, and the joint communique will also reflect on this particular aspect. But if the US does not participate in it, remains to be seen how powerful and impactful that joint communique is going to be.
Yes, absolutely. And Megha, can you inform us what we can expect to come over the next few hours? What, of course, we will be bringing you here on NewsX World as we continue our coverage of this G7 summit in Alberta.
Right, absolutely. So the schedule for the day is out. We are going to see the Canada and US bilateral talks taking place. They have actually already happened. We'll see the G7 working session that takes place. The outreach nation, South Korea, the Prime Minister of South Korea is going to be arriving shortly. We can see there is going to be a Canada-Japan bilateral taking place as well. Arrival of the NATO chief Mark Rutte, arrival of the World Bank President Ajay Banga. We see Canada and France holding a bilateral later in the evening today, and the Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum is also going to be arriving later in the day. We also see a bilateral between Canada and Italy. There is going to be in the evening at about 5:45 p.m. local time the G7 family photo. After that, we will see the arrival of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which will happen at 6:35 local time in the evening. There is going to be, of course, Antonio Guterres, very important, the UN Secretary General, who is going to be arriving as well, and Brazil President Lula da Silva will be arriving later on as well. And at this time, no information yet on when the Ukrainian president is going to land in Kananaskis. His arrival is eagerly awaited as well. So that's the plan for the day today. Josh, also we saw that there were a couple of bilaterals that took place yesterday as well between the Canadian Prime Minister and Keir Starmer, the UK counterpart. And we even saw other bilaterals taking place between Canada, which is the host nation, and the other G7 leaders who have descended upon Kananaskis for this major global event.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Megha, for joining us. We expect several more bilaterals and potential trilaterals to take place. So